Grand. I'm the Dean of the University of San Francisco School of Law. I'm pleased to welcome you tonight to this incredible setting yet again in this beautiful courtroom for the 9th annual Jack Pemberton Lecture. And I do want to note something special tonight, and I don't mean to embarrass the individual I'm about to mention, but of course, almost to the moment, 45 years ago today, an assassin's bullets fell Dr. King at the Lorraine Hotel. And we are honored to have an old friend of Bill's with us, Clarence Jones, who is a scholar at the University of San Francisco. And Clarence, forgive me, but one of the most inspirational human beings on the planet. Clarence, we welcome you as Dr. King's aide, good friend, lawyer, and terrific person. Clarence Jones. Tonight's lecture, of course, features Stanford law professor and dear friend of the Pemberton Lecture series, Bill Gould. Bill will talk on a topic dear to San Franciscans, whose beloved Giants have won the World Series now 2 of the last 3 years. Bill's topic, bargaining, race, and globalization. How baseball and other sports mirror collective bargaining law and life. And of course, others will give Bill his proper introduction. And I'll avoid getting sidetracked into his tremendous career and his love of baseball. A serious temptation given my own love affair with the game and having been one of the owners of the Reno Silver Sox throughout the 1990s in the California League. But trust me on this, Bill's work is impressive, and by the time this lecture ends, you'll have a view of the game that goes well beyond the Matt Cain slider that we've all come to love. Bill, we're honored to have you with us, even if you are an incorrigible Boston Red Sox fan. But there's someone not present tonight whose presence pervades every inch in this room, and for many, every pore of our bodies. And that's Jack Pemberton, who spent 9 tumultuous decades on the planet, during which he was a warrior for civil liberties, a tireless fighter for justice, a brilliant and pioneering educator, and an invaluable colleague, a loving father, grandfather, and husband, and a loyal friend. In his 90 years, a time in which American history ricocheted from Jim Crow to Brown versus the Board of Education to the Civil Rights Act, from the Palmer raids to McCarthyism to the Patriot Act, from European and Pacific battlefields in 2 world wars to Hamlets in Vietnam, and from Woodrow Wilson to Barack Obama, Jack lit up lives and fought the good fight as he journeyed from the Harvard Law School to war-torn India and Egypt, to the ACLU, to Rochester, to the South, to Duke, to USF, to the EEOC, and finally, to the Russian River. And along the way, he battled intolerance and discrimination, defended the Bill of Rights, litigated to ensure that the worth of a marriage was reflected in love, not in the color of one's skin, argued to preserve equality in the polling place, and tirelessly sought justice for workers. And also along the way, his love embraced a wife, and I hope I have these numbers right, because with Jack it was just such an incredible family. A wife of 36 years, 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren, along with countless friends and colleagues. Jack lived, loved, litigated, battled, inspired, taught, and mentored. And I want to welcome in particular Jack's wife, Fran, who I haven't seen in a long time, and daughters Nancy and Carol. Could you just stand so folks can get it? pay tribute to this giant of a man who in fact was so gentle and humble and would have been the last to claim the monikers that we yearly pin on him and his inspirational life. I would be remiss if I did not note Jack's pervasive impact on the University of San Francisco School of Law. Jack taught us that training lawyers with a passion for creating a more humane and just world is the true measure of the worth of a law school, a charge that he led with skill in the classroom and with compassion and courage for his entire life. For me, and I think for all of our community, his values continue to guide our work at the law school. Jack would have been reveling in all kinds of things tonight, particularly given today's political climate in which the rights of workers are under attack from Ohio to Wisconsin to Texas to Arizona and to Florida, to name a few. Jack would have been rolling up his sleeves for the fight and would have viewed this series as yet another arrow in his quiver. Jack would have reveled in the communities that tonight's event brings together: legal educators, practitioners, and organizers dedicated to fair dealing in the workplace. Jack would have reveled in the fact that his work at the law school is being carried on by one of the strongest labor law faculties in the country, led by Professors Michelle Travis, Maria Ontiveros, Tristan Green, and Bob Talbot, who all deserve thanks for their vision and implementation of a robust labor curriculum that focuses on organized workers, individuals in the workplace, work-life balance, undocumented workers, and workers of color. But more than anything, Jack would have reveled in the fact that it is the law students who propel this annual event, who inspire our rich labor law curriculum, and who engage in workplace justice issues around the globe. So I think it particularly fitting to offer a special word to our dear students. Students, please know this. We love your energy and thank you for it and your commitment to fairness and to workplace justice. We thank you for putting the smile on Jack's face that he surely would have had if only he could be here tonight. And this final thought. As most of you know, this is the law school's centennial year. It's not hard to imagine what Jack's toast to the law school would have been in this celebratory time. He would be reminding us that our centennial is about more than a storied past. It's about our commitment to a second century of a pursuit of justice to change the world from here. And I can hear Jack's closing words. He surely would have reminded us that we are not here to blow out birthday candles, but we're here to fan the flames of justice as he did for his entire life. I welcome all of you to the 9th annual Jack Pemberton Workplace Justice Lecture. Welcome.
And welcome everybody. I'm Maria Ontiveros, and we're here tonight, the day before the home opener for the San Francisco Giants, to listen to two wonderful speakers discuss the intersection between sports law, labor law, equality, race, and life. Our keynote speaker tonight is William B. Gould IV, who is the Charles A. Beardsley Professor of Law Emeritus at Stanford University and former chair of the National Labor Relations Board. But I know him as Bill. I met Bill 25 years ago, over 25 years ago now, when I first moved to the San Francisco Bay Area to begin my legal career. He became a friend and a mentor, and for better or worse, he was the person who convinced me to make the move from practice to academia. I hope all my students out there believe that that is something to thank him for. Bill was with us on the occasion of the inaugural Jack Pemberton Lecture on Workplace Justice, where he gave a brilliant tribute to his good friend, the late Jack Pemberton. We have wanted him to return to give a keynote lecture ever since, but we were waiting for just the right time. And we decided that the Centennial Pemberton Lecture provides exactly that opportunity. Bill is an expert on many things in labor and employment. We could have had him speak on employment discrimination due to his handling of one of the most important disparate impact cases of all time, one which he handled with Jack. We could have asked him to speak on labor law, given his 4-year stint as chair of the National Labor Relations Board. We could have asked him to talk about the intersection of those in race relations in his seminal book, Black Workers and White Unions. Tonight, though, we've asked him to speak on one of his passions and one of my passions, which is baseball and sports. Bill has been a baseball arbitrator and student of the game for many years. We will forgive him his undying devotion to the Boston Red Sox. He's also recently published a highly acclaimed book, Bargaining with Baseball, Labor Relations in an Age of Prosperous Turmoil. Drawing on that book and additional research that he's done, he's going to talk about bargaining, about race, and about globalization in the context of baseball and sports to show how those mirror collective bargaining law and life. Following his comments, we are very, very thrilled to have another voice on the podium. He is an I guess I shouldn't call him an up-and-comer because he's really one of the leaders in the fields of sports law, Professor Jeremy Duro from the American University. He's the author of the best-selling casebook in the sports and the sports law field. In 2005, he was named the National Bar Association Sports and Entertainment Lawyer of the Year. And he's recently published a book called Advancing the Ball, which deals with race, reformation, and the quest for equal coaching opportunity in the NFL. We are looking forward to a very interesting discussion from our two wonderful speakers. And we'll start with Professor Gould. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for that very kind introduction, and it's such an honor to be here and to speak to you on this occasion on the 9th annual Pemberton Lecture, the centennial of the law school, to see Fran and the Pemberton family here. And of course, we're particularly proud of Maria, who did her graduate work at Stanford Law School and has that amongst many of her great accomplishments. This honor is particularly important to me because of the fact that the late Jack Pemberton was such a dear and good friend of mine. We had a close personal and professional working relationship that went on for a number of years. We met when I brought a group of workers from the Detroit Edison Company to testify before the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in early 1971. And Jack sought them out and wanted to meet them, and as a result of his contact with them, I got to know Jack, and then when he came out here to the USF Law School 1 year after my arrival at Stanford, well, it was a natural, and we became co-counsel on the Detroit Edison case, which took many more years of our lives than we thought was going to be the case, and Jack was so important, so valuable, and you know, this word we were talking about at lunch today, this word mentor, you know, which I wasn't aware of as a young man, but actually, of course, as I look at it beyond my own parents, I did have a few people who were my mentors, and Jack Pemberton clearly was one of those. He was co-counsel with me in the Edison case, which produced great results. He was co-counsel with me in the hard times as well, and some other class actions which didn't produce the results that we thought they were going to. And then we combined our classes at Stanford and USF and took them back and forth each week. 1 week we would meet at Stanford, and 1 week we would come up here to USF. We had a wonderful time with our employment discrimination law seminar, which was made all the more lively by the fact that many of the issues that we were talking about, we were in court on and writing briefs about. Now, of course, with regard to today's topic, there are aspects of this that Jack would have been very much interested in, as the Dean has already pointed out. The issue of race, the issue of discrimination, the issues of employment conditions, collective bargaining, the workplace. Jack was not very much interested in sports, particularly from a spectator's perspective. And I can recall the expressions, the glazed expressions, when I would try to engage him from time to time. But I'm told, but I didn't participate in this, that he was quite a good tennis player, and I think he and Fran played quite frequently. Today, my focus is disproportionately, as one might imagine, on baseball, not only because of my interest, but because of the timing, the fact that the opening day is tomorrow, that the Giants have won. The Giants have now joined the Red Sox as the only team in the 21st century to have won the World Championship twice in this century. And of course, the Oakland Athletics, we mustn't forget about them, where the practitioners of Moneyball defend now the Western Division Championship. And in keeping with the idea of spring and new beginnings, I think that this subject is important as new people like, this is my last digression on the Boston Red Sox, at least for a while. My penultimate one, the Jackie Bradley Jr. patrolling, just fresh out of the University of South Carolina, patrolling left field for the Red Sox. Now, nearly 30 years after I was given a photo by the Red Sox second string catcher, Roy Quartier, of the infamous dash to home plate by Enos Slaughter in the 7th game of the 1946 World Series, when they prevailed 4 games to 3. I often look at it on my wall. The photo was signed by all in it, except one person who's a little bit out of the picture. It is the third base coach of the St. Louis Cardinals called Mike Gonzalez. Who's standing a little bit further up the line. Mike Gonzalez always intrigued me, a man with a Spanish Latin name who was there in the last game of the color bar in the 20th century in this country. Following spring, we know that Jackie Robinson, broke the color bar. Though contrary to much public belief, he was, of course, not the first black player in organized baseball. 33 black players were there between 1878 and 1889, before the door was sealed to them through Jim Crow and Plessy against Ferguson. They were driven out of baseball before the turn of the century. In the 20th century, with the advent of some Latin players, particularly from baseball-dominant and baseball-crazy Cuba, where the game has been played almost as long as the United States, the matter took on added complexity. Mike Gonzalez came from Cuba, and as authors of books about baseball in Cuba have said, that at least one unheralded, as Peter Jackman called him, ebony-skinned Cincinnati pitcher of Cuban birth preceded Robinson in crossing the 20th century racial barriers during the 1944 season. And others came in 45 and 46, and even one who I was familiar with, Luis Olmo of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who, as the author said, slipped behind the racial barriers quietly and almost unnoticed. Cuban Dolph Luque, pitching in the 1919 World Series, so light-skinned that the door was not barred to him, and reminding one of his supposed aggressiveness of Samuel Taduno, who pitched during this past few weeks for the Dominican Republic, as he performed so effectively and taunted the Giants center fielder after he had struck him out in the 5th inning. Robinson, before Robinson, Branch Rickey, the owner of the Dodgers, had considered dark-skinned Cuban Silvio Garcia as a possible candidate to be the first black player. Thus does the nuanced interplay between race and globalization begin to emerge long before this word globalization was being used in connection with our economy and baseball. Robinson, of course, was followed by many others, but under a strict quota system, which generally limited each club to 2 black players, no more than 2. They were, of course, we know many of them in this area, Mays being one, far superior to the other players. They were not bench players. They were not people who observed the game. Black players in this era, in the wake of Robinson, were out-hitting white players by about, on an average, 30 points, which is no small figure. The case came here in the Court of Appeals in the 9th Circuit involving this unwritten quota when baseball belatedly decided to compensate some of the black players who had been limited to the Negro League and give them pensions that would have been theirs had they been in the league during that period of time. Judge Reinhardt said that the unwritten quota of 2 black players per team was broken, and 2 black players per team and outstanding talent was broken in the 1970s. The number of black players went up to approximately 30% of the total players in the universe. This spring, as the papers have noted here in San Francisco, there was not only no black American player on the roster of the San Francisco Giants, there was no black American player in the camp, minor league, as well as major league, of the San Francisco Giants. This team, which once had not only Mays, but Monty Irvin and other important names in baseball history. Baseball, of course, was the last of the major sports to have a field leader on the field, Frank Robinson in 1975. It has now 2 black managers in the 30 teams, very few in the so-called line of progression, bench coaches, third base coaches, and as I say, a dwindling number of players. Now, why has this happened? How has this happened? And this comes to the heart of what I want to talk to you about tonight. I think that there are a number of factors involved in this. One of the baseball senior people in organized baseball, Major League Baseball, said a few years ago that he said the decline of black children playing baseball is attributable to the inability to get instant gratification in baseball, is what he said. So these kids think they can come out of high school and go right to the pros in basketball and football. Well, of course, this is not only stereotypical, but ignores the fact that, particularly due to a case that we were talking about earlier today, involving the running back from Ohio State, Maurice Clark against the National Football League, they cannot go. Football and basketball players cannot go directly to the pros. Baseball players can go directly out of high school or after they go to college. And this is the very cozy accommodation that is established between Major League Baseball and the NCAA after their junior year. Closely aligned to this business of instant gratification is the second point that is often cited, and that is the disproportionate number of fathers in black households. Although when this argument is put forward, it never seems to be noted that it doesn't seem to have affected the number of blacks who go into football and basketball. Now, it's noticeable that in the cities, there are facilities. When I was in Washington with the MRB, I was looking for a batting cage and believe it or not, take a few cuts, and I couldn't find one in all of Washington, D.C. In all of Washington, D.C. And how do the kids get going in baseball? They get going by virtue of being on so-called travel teams, which my grandson is a part of, at the age of 8, 9, 10. These are kids who are more likely to be playing high school, college, professional baseball down the road. The role of the colleges, and I think if there's one thing that comes out of my talk tonight, I want you to focus upon this, the role of colleges, which merits a great deal of attention. First of all, the college baseball game has been less important historically in the United States. Professional baseball antedates college baseball. In 1869, 1870, we saw not only the first professional teams in baseball, not only in the United States, but the first professional teams anywhere in the world. Fidel Castro, I want to say some words about in connection with the globalization aspect of this, really is not all that far off base in pursuing this idea of amateur baseball in contrast to professional baseball. The problem is that history has really passed him by. The professional game has become more important. This is not true of football and basketball. These games were played on an amateur level before professional leagues were organized, in the case of football in 1920 and in the case of basketball on a national level in 1946. More than 50% of the people who go into professional baseball come from the colleges. This is in sharp contrast to the time when I was in charge, when most of the people who played the game were from the rural South and probably didn't have a high school education, let alone a college education. Most of the players in professional baseball come through, they may not have graduated, but they come from the, which is a separate story unto itself, they come from the college ranks. One writer has said, the standard argument is that diversity, and only 4% of the baseball players in college are African American. That's approximately 1/2 of the percentage in Major League Baseball. Standard argument is that the college game suffers because of baseball's, again, dwindling popularity among the African Americans. Well, why is this? This gives an incomplete picture. A lower percentage of African Americans participate in college baseball than in cross-country, fencing, soccer, volleyball, wrestling. They don't actually match baseball's lack of black participation on the professional stage. These sports don't exactly compete with basketball and football in black neighborhoods. Now, King football has the revenues in the universities. Football and basketball have the revenues. And so they have the athletic scholarships. Football awards 85 in Division I, a place like Stanford, 85 scholarships. Basketball, of course, the number of players is fewer, 13. The baseball has 11.7. Nobody has a full scholarship who plays baseball. And this problem, and the players are supposed to cover their expenses and tuition in sharp contrast to these other sports. This is exacerbated by the dominance of private universities in college baseball, universities like Stanford, which for many years has not had a single black player, but now has 2. And Miami, Rice, these are the powerhouses, but the system is such that you are not going to see unless the child's parents have a great deal of income, you're not going to see these people, poor people, people of color, in baseball. 34%, as I say, of college players are black. 34% in football. And 45% in basketball. Only 0.5% of all college coaches are black. Tony Gwynn at San Diego State, standing in stark as a lonely contrast to this pattern. In the Southeastern Conference, where blacks couldn't play at all until the 1970s, baseball dominant, Louisiana State and University of Florida, where the black population is the highest, virtually no black. 70% of those playing football are black at Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and the percentage is so different from the percentage in the student body. Baseball is not in the game at all. And my view is that steps need to be taken by baseball in conjunction with the NCAA. There have been some discussions between the two of them, but also by the Department of Education, Health and Human Services and Education, in terms of their contracting authority. Women established the proposition through Title IX that universities could not defend their unwillingness to give scholarships, athletic scholarships to women, because women's sports did not produce revenue. That went by the board. The idea that the production of revenue determines who gets a scholarship was forever not defeated by the enactment of Title VII, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which is why we have today women's basketball teams still don't have comparable status and stature that men's teams have. And I think that although, of course, Title IX does not apply to this situation, and there are dissimilarities between the Title IX situation, and because women were being barred altogether from sports. And blacks, of course, are being recruited for certain sports. But when we talk about disparate impact, the universities are following a policy which is disproportionately excludes blacks and poor. And of course, there is another factor in this entire scenario, and that is globalization. There's a link between globalization and this problem of racial exclusion, because it's an exclusion for many white Americans as well, but disproportionately black Americans. What has happened is that baseball was defeated at every step of the way by this very active Major League Players Union in the beginning of the 1970s. And it obtained an arbitration award from arbitrator Seitz in 1975, establishing for the first time free agency in baseball. You know, most of the sports got free agency because of the antitrust laws, but the Supreme Court had held in 1922 and subsequently in 1952 that the antitrust laws did not apply to baseball. Football, so free agency was achieved through Seitz's arbitration award. 1976 collective bargaining agreement establishes free agency. And for 30 years, you have a kind of 30 years war where the owners are attempting to beat back the players' union until the mother of all strikes in 1994 and 1995, which I was involved in when I was chairman of the National Labor Relations Board. And you have, in the wake of that intervention in 1995, an era of peace, but an era of very high increasing salaries. And so baseball begins to look around for new revenue. That search for new revenue takes a number of forms. It takes, first of all, of course, in connection with globalization, the sale of all kinds of products. You see them here, you see them tomorrow if you go to the ballpark, but the thing is, you see them abroad too. I've been to Indonesia, Turkey, where no one has any sense of baseball, but they're wearing this paraphernalia, which has been sold to them. And then, in another way as well, you know, that now, because of Japan and the Far East, advertising in American games in kanji, behind home plate, the television spectator gets up very early in the morning to see the Japanese players playing in Major League Baseball, sees advertisements beamed directly at them. 5 years ago, this was costing between Japanese advertisers between $120,000 and $160,000 per half inning. I'm sure it's much more than this now. What has occurred with the advent of Japanese players. And then there's more to this, and that bears directly on our theme of who the players are. In the 1950s, 1960s, many players came to the United States from Puerto Rico. We had one of them who played here in San Francisco, will probably be in attendance tomorrow, Cepeda, Baby Gould from Puerto Rico. You don't find, of course, you don't find many players, comparatively speaking, from Puerto Rico anymore. Major League Baseball in 1990 introduced an international draft system covering Puerto Rico and Canada, and suddenly baseball shifted its attention away from Puerto Rico. It began to shift its attention away from the United States. And where did it begin to look? It began to look in two areas: Dominican Republic and Venezuela. Dominican Republic is a very poor country where there are not well-established leagues, where players who play the game play with under more primitive conditions than we played as kids in the 1940s. What's emerged from this is a problem of, really, let us be frank about it, child labor. Child labor. It's a human rights child labor issue. Because what happens now is each team has established, most teams have established academies to bring in young players who are just on the brink of being teenagers, and who can be signed, in contrast to the United States. Puerto Rico and Canada can be signed at the age of 16. And this has done, let's just look very briefly at what this has produced. Pedro Martinez, many of you may know of him, who was a very, probably for a decade, maybe the outstanding pitcher in Major League Baseball. What kind of bonus did he get? He got $6,500. Mike Mussina, who went to Stanford, got $225,000. Troy Tulowitzki of Colorado got $2.3 million. Henry Ramirez, whom we saw here on the field just a few nights ago, $23,000. The average signing bonus, which has begun to increase a little bit in Latin America, is less than half of the signing bonus that is given to American players. And this whole situation was best summarized by a former Colorado Rockies executive who said, look, instead of signing 4 Americans at $25,000 each, you sign 20 Dominican guys for $5,000 each. And what that does is to, of course, provide for a supply of labor that is not as directly affected by what has happened at the major league level. The bonuses are much smaller, and also brought with it a series of abuses, which is now beginning to embarrass baseball considerably. The use of steroids, which we know about in this city, age, identity fraud, so that one can pretend to be younger and get more. The appearance of so-called Buscones, who are the suppliers of child labor to major league teams. Now, what is going to happen, I think, as a result of this publicity, is that we're going to see a change in Latin America, probably by June 1, because for a decade now, baseball has debated the question of whether they are better off doing what they did in Canada and Puerto Rico and having an international draft there as well. Each team would have exclusive drafted, this is what happened in the United States in the 1960s. The Yankees were grabbing everybody, and so we set up a draft system which theoretically allowed other people to be able to sign the players through the draft system. And it is thought that through this international draft system, the players will that we'll be able to clean up some of these abuses that are so essentially related to a child labor problem, and that I think is in part related also to the disappearance of Black Americans in these United States. Foreign players, not only from Latin America, but also, of course, from the Far East. And here you have now established leagues, a system put into place whereby some of the Japanese players and Korean players are allowed to come to the majors if their teams are willing to allow them to come here. They must consent prior to, if the players try to come here before those players are free agents. It's no coincidence that Nomo of the Los Angeles Dodgers suddenly made his appearance in the wake of the 94-95 strike. He exploited loopholes and became a free agent and was able to come to the United States and to be signed by the Los Angeles Dodgers because he was free of his contractual obligations in Japan. That has set off a series of events. Kentucky Irabu, who San Diego Padres wanted to employ and did not want to be employed by the San Diego Padres, wanted to be, much to his regret, and to the owner's regret, he wanted to be employed by the New York Yankees. And he went there, and that set off the Nomo and Irabu systems, set off a series of events which have created these country-specific procedures. Major League Baseball has agreements with Japan, with Korea, and with Mexico as well. And there's litigation about Mexico in the Southern District of California now. So we don't know what will come of these programs as Major League Baseball looks at this idea of an international draft. Why is Major League Baseball looking at an international draft idea now? Of course, it's in part because of the abuses that I referred to in Latin America, which are bringing them bad publicity. But it's also attributable to something else as well, and that is Cuba. Cuba is where the players are. Cuba has played this game before any of the other Latin countries, almost as long as the United States. I've just been to Cuba in December and attended some of the games there and met with the commissioner, and they are counting the minutes and hours and days for a relaxation of tensions, for really what will have to be a repeal of Helms-Burton. The president no longer, because of what President Clinton acceded to in connection with Helms-Burton, no longer has the authority to resume trade with Cuba. It must be an act of Congress. Until there's an act of Congress, there can only be defectors. Cubans are very obviously weakened by defectors. Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, when they were here in San Francisco last week, a couple of weeks ago, they had many players that are very familiar to you who played in the major leagues, and they play for their own country's team. Not so, Cuba. Cuba forever loses those players. Those players can't go home, and they can't be regarded as representatives of Cuba. Now, why is Major League Baseball concerned about this? Because this is a new source of free agency. These players, unless some agreement or system is put in place along the lines of what exists with Japan and Korea and Mexico, you'll have these players coming as free agents. Because what they do, what Chapman with Cincinnati did, and what Orlando, El Duque, Hernandez did with the Yankees, was to go to a different country and establish residence. And once they had done that, they escaped Helms-Burton, and they became free agents. And everybody, in contrast to every other player, everybody had to, anybody who wanted them, had to bid for them. It was a free market, which baseball does not want. Now, this situation in Cuba is what baseball really fears, because there is gold in them there hills. There are going to be so many players coming out. We have more than 100 already who have defected from Cuba to the United States. I wanted to say something about the World Baseball Classic here, which we saw here. There's so much, I think, that is good about this World Baseball Classic. It's going to, if it's followed to its logical conclusion, it's going to create issues with regard to what law applies in connection with disputes which arise, as they inevitably will, between teams and players and teams and teams. The World Baseball Classic, ironically, is much more popular in the rest of the world than it is right here in the United States. Japan, you know, when Japan was eliminated from the World Baseball Classic that first night, it was like kind of the oxygen went out of that tournament. There was so much excitement and energy there, and a large measure of excitement and energy continued with the other team. The big problem, of course, is that Americans, traditionally xenophobic, don't want to really commit themselves to international competition. No, because that might interfere with the commercial situation that exists here in the United States. The best players don't play for the United States. And the United States has been successful in devising all kinds of rules, which, for instance, limit the number of pitches that the pitchers can throw. Well, why? Because, of course, it's the American players who are just beginning spring training. And they're the ones who the rules are designed to promote. Note where the United States plays in the brackets. Cuba had to travel to the ends of the earth, to the Far East, to face formidable Japan and Korea, and the Cinderella team, the Netherlands. And the United States had relatively easy competition, avoiding any confrontation with the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and we still didn't make it. So we've got to we've got to really, I say in this paper, we've got to really devise a system whereby we're serious and where we substitute the finals of this classic for the All-Star game, which occurs in the middle of our summer in the heat of the Pemberton. We must take steps to deal with the absence of Black Americans from the game. We must take steps by urging contracting authorities in the United States to put pressure on the NCAA to indirectly, therefore, put pressure on Major League Baseball. Baseball's taken some steps. They've created some projects in Compton, California, and a few other, the so-called runs RBI project, the Intercity project, but so much more must be done. That doesn't mean we should move away from globalization. We should try to have, baseball can only succeed and sports can only succeed if we have the very best talent, but to have the talent on a level playing field where we eliminate the abuses that have attracted the United States to Latin America. We want a true World Series. We talk of the Giants and the Red Sox as being world champions in the 21st century, but of course they are champions in this particular country. We want a true World Series. Sealy wants that series, and I commend him for it, ultimately between the United States and Japan. We want a true World Series, and a series which, in which Mike Gonzalez, Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Bradley today are not just outside the picture, standing up the line, but are right in the middle of the picture with all the diverse people from this universe in which we live.
President Gould, thank you so much. I'm truly pleased and honored to be here. Maria, thank you for your warm and kind introduction. When I was invited to be a part of this event many, many months ago, I began to study Jack Pemberton a bit and learn a lot about his tremendous work, and it made me feel even more honored to be invited to be here. And then at lunch today, I had the opportunity to learn about him as a person, and I'm overwhelmed to be asked to be a part of this tremendous event. And Professor Gould, who insists I call him Bill, is truly a giant. And I mean, obviously in this area, but also in this, for those unfamiliar with this field, in this field, he's a giant. Somebody who's meant a lot to me in this field is someone named Ken Shropshire, who is a professor at Wharton, the Legal Studies Department at Wharton. And he's really been a mentor to me. Professor Gould used the word mentor. He's been an incredible mentor to me, and I respect him incredibly. Professor Gould was his mentor, and he respects Professor Gould incredibly so. My respect for Professor Gould is compounded, but when you respect somebody and they tell you to do something, you do it. And so, Bill, it is going forward. But with all due respect, Bill, there's been a lot of talk about the Red Sox and the Giants. With all due respect, I did not foresee the Red Sox having a season this year. Rival with the Giants will do. But what I do foresee, and some of you know where I live and some don't, but there is another National League team based in Washington, D.C. that I think will have a season that will rival the Giants. And I think that this autumn, if there are any friendly bets folks want to make, I suspect that the Nationals will come out on top. kind of bossy. So, other kinds of comments were outstanding. Fabulous comments. There aren't that many people who spend a lot of time talking about race and sport. There's a kind of small cohort of us in the academy who talk about race and sport. And it can be hard to talk about because sport is really an escape for a lot of people. You know, it's a fantasy world. If you're working towards final exams, you're struggling with this or that issue in life, and then the NCAA tournament comes up and you're suddenly watching the games and you're enthused about it, you're excited and you're happy. It's an escape. And a lot of people don't like their escapes to be salted up with, real world issues. And I think anybody who's dealt with race and sport has dealt with that. Maria mentioned a book that I wrote. It's about the Rudy Rule of the National Football League and this idea that we need to expand opportunity for coaches in the National Football League, expand opportunity for people of color. And after I wrote that book, I began to get, negative, mail and, hate mail is too strong a word, but definitely some ugly mail. People, they found me on my Facebook privacy settings were low, so I'm getting Facebook messages. And, go back to Africa and all this sort of stuff. And so it's not, people get really uncomfortable, but when we have an opportunity to talk about it, I think we do. And so I'm so pleased with the choice of topic here. And I want to jump off in some ways from what Bill offered, and particularly the one quote. He spoke about the nuanced interplay between race and globalization. And that's what I'd like to talk about. In Bill's comments, he spoke particularly about, with respect to race, about Black Americans becoming a smaller and smaller percentage of the Major League Baseball playing population. I want to even go further and think about people of color becoming a smaller and smaller part of the sports playing population in this country. So moving even beyond African Americans and beyond the game of baseball. To think about globalization, internationalization, and what it means for the racial dynamics in sport in this country. And I think we have to ask the question, how might leagues be incentivized to internationalize? Or how might they be disincentivized to do that? And getting to that question, I think we start with research that's been done primarily in the 1980s, into the 1990s, into the 2000s, that's explored composition, racial composition of teams and leagues in this country. And a number of sociological studies revealed that people like to watch people like them doing things on athletic fields and courts. And the game-attending fans like to see people who are playing the games who look like them. And game-attending fans, because of the cost of these games, also the socioeconomic factors, have turned out, by most surveys, to be predominantly white. And so, there's this idea that if someone might consume what you have to offer in a package that might not be perfect for them, you perfect up the package they want to consume it more. Some people call this the new kids on the block theory. I don't know if I'm dating myself here. The new kids on the block, but New Kids on the Block is a pop group out of Boston, Massachusetts. They were big when I was a teenager. But before the New Kids on the Block, there was New Edition. New Edition was a pop group out of Boston. And it was somebody named Maurice Starr who discovered New Edition. And New Edition became huge. I mean, they became really, really big. They sang kind of poppy rhythm and blues stuff. There were 5 young men. They were all black. So things went sour with New Edition. Maurice Starr decided that he would try to start again. And he went out and started the New Kids on the Block. And New Kids on the Block, from Boston, a poppy R&B group, 5 guys, all white. The same product, essentially. New Kids on the Block was white. And although New Edition did well, New Kids on the Block was off the charts. It was off the charts. So the question is, might sports teams kind of work under this New Kids on the Block theory? The sociological study suggested it might have happened, and I would argue that it did happen. If we look, anecdotally at some of the teams over the course of the years, we can't go through all of them. If you look at the Boston Celtics from 1980, they were a team. They were three-quarters of the team was white, although three-quarters of the league, the National Basketball Association, was black. A lot of people looked into it. A sociologist named Morty Reed at the University of Massachusetts and crunched the numbers over the course of 8 years or whatever. He concluded, I'm not a statistician, but he concluded that, it's a statistically significant matter. This was not a coincidence. There was an intent to make the team primarily white. Now, nobody would argue with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale their place on the team, but the argument was the bench players who rarely play in the game, but who are seen by the game-attending fans are, if you've got a choice, when the final cuts come up, maybe you pick the white person over the person of color, and the New Kids on the Block theory. The Red Sox also had some challenges in this regard. There was a long time when Jim Rice was the only black player on the team. The Utah Jazz, more recently, I think for 15 years, starting in the 1990s, going through 2005, 2006, the percentage of white players on their team outstripped the percentage of white players in the league year after year after year. And the trend seemed to be that in places where we might have a bit of a racial powder keg, some of the case in Boston, I think, at the time, or places where the population of people of color is comparatively low, Salt Lake City, Utah, then maybe those are places where you might see some discrimination in the composition of teams. More recently, there's been some folks who have written about the Minnesota Timberwolves, whose team seems to be disproportionately white, and they kind of the same theory. There's been a lot of debate about it. So is there anything to this? Is it just coincidence? I don't know. But if there is anything to it, then we have to ask whether leagues might try to manipulate racial compositions, as perhaps teams have tried to manipulate racial composition. And if leagues might, then I think we have to explore the possibility that internationalization can serve as a means of effectuating that manipulation. So let's look at the major United States leagues. National football. Everyone basically plays in the leagues American. So we take that off the table, right? Internationalization doesn't impact that league very much. National Hockey League, very international, but for the most part, wherever hockey is played, it's played by white people. That's not entirely the case. I mean, there's a tremendous West Indian community growing up in Toronto, and we're seeing more and more players of color in the National Hockey League. But overall, whether you internationalize more or less, it's likely not going to change the racial composition of the National Hockey League. Let's look at the National Basketball Association. So the NBA, the domestic pool of NBA players is overwhelmingly African American. The international pool of basketball players is much less so. Probably, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would say majority white by some margin. Not a huge margin, but by some margin. So if there is internationalization in the NBA, it will, on balance, lighten the complexion of the NBA. Might that be something the NBA wants to do? Well, some of you may remember what is known by many as the Malice in the Palace. And the Malice in the Palace was a brawl at the Palace in Auburn Hills in Detroit when Pacers played the Pistons, and Ron Artest, one of the players of the Pacers, ran off the floor after something was thrown at him and started fighting in the stands with fans of the Pistons. It was a complete and utter embarrassment, debacle. It was horrible. I've seen the footage a bunch of times because I've written about it. It was terrible. And the NBA was badly embarrassed by that. And it became clear that they wanted to stamp out what they believed was a thug culture developing in the league. And a number of actions were taken in attempting to do so. One, they instituted this dress code where you couldn't dress like Allen Iverson, basically. Was the dress code. You couldn't have baggy pants, you couldn't wear throwback jerseys, you couldn't wear athletic apparel, you had to dress in business attire. A lot of black players in the league said, hey, this is targeted at us. And a lot of people kind of felt as though maybe the NBA's approach to stamping out thug culture is to reduce the black presence. The argument the NBA has an unfortunate, stereotypical, and unsophisticated view of the black community, and they wanted to do something to change their image. And so, might internationalization be a means of them doing so? Bill Roden, the great scholar out of, journalist, I call him a scholar, there's an incredible book called $40 Million Slaves, which I encourage anybody who's interested in this stuff to read. Journalist with the New York Times is quoted as saying, the NBA actively grooms as many non-black players as it can. And he says that when he's talking about internationalization. The NBA is seeking to internationalize in every way it can. It seems almost desperate to do so. It's very active in the international market. I think we have to ask ourselves, there's certainly money to be made there, but is a part of it a desire to lighten the complexion? Okay, let's contrast that with Major League Soccer. So Major League Soccer has a domestic player pool that is largely white. The international player pool is largely of color. People who are playing in Europe tend to want to stay in Europe. I think most players in Europe would rather play in the Championship, which is the league under the English Premier League in the United Kingdom, then come over to the United States. You get paid more, there's more respect, the game probably is better, even at that second division level. The international player pool for Major League Soccer comes from the West Indies and from Central and South America. And it is an overwhelmingly darkly complected population. Major League Soccer restricts internationalization. They have a rule that does so. You may have no more than 8 international players on your squad of 20 under Major League Soccer's rule. Might that be motivated in some part by this idea, this New Kids on the Block, this idea that if we package the product in a way that's most appealing to the fans, that it will do that. And other people who have argued that there are other reasons for that. And one of the major arguments is that the United States national soccer team is not that strong, and to have a domestic league that is a real building, block essentially for players who can compete on that level is a good thing. I think that's, I don't really buy that argument. I think if you want to look at the way you build a strong national team in a sport that might not really be America's sport, as soccer is not, I think you look to hockey. National Hockey League has no restrictions. And there are an average of 4 players who are American on each NHL team. So maybe slightly over 100 American players in the league, right? But the American national hockey team is competitive. Every major tournament, every Olympics. And the golds and the silvers and the bronze, they're up there. And I think the theory is you put in the best you've got, however few they are, against the best in the world, and they will get really good. And you will have a player pool to choose from of outstanding players. Major League Soccer's theory, if indeed this is their reason for this restriction, is you have a lot of players playing, but they're not playing against the best. And they're not getting as good, and the national soccer team is not in anywhere as good as the national hockey team. So I don't really buy that argument by Major League Soccer. There may be others, but I think we have to ask ourselves if a part of it might be using internationalization to manipulate racial competition. And if it is, bringing us back full circle to baseball, might we someday see the same thing in baseball? Right? So baseball, the domestic player pool is largely white. And the international player pool, as Bill mentioned, is largely of color. And there are people who, there are whispers around Major League Baseball that this or that team is becoming too Latin. And if those whispers get louder, and if people take that seriously, and if this idea of packaging the product in a certain way with respect to race prevails, might it be possible that Major League Baseball might at some point institute some sort of international player restriction? It seems far-fetched, maybe outrageous. I don't know that it is. Let's transport ourselves back, and I'll close with this, and we can, I guess, open it up to questions. Okay. Let's transport ourselves back 100 years, 1 century, and let's look at the sporting landscape then. So baseball was a popular game then. Football was getting popular on the college level. The professional game was nothing to speak of. No basketball to speak of. Many of the sports that mean something to us now didn't mean much back then. We had baseball. There was boxing, which is now being drummed out of existence, but then it was huge. There was horse racing, which was massive, and cycling, also massive. Very big in terms of the century. The ranks of the jockeys then were overwhelmingly African American. The jockey community was largely black. The majority of the first 30 Kentucky Derby winners were black. The same went for cycling. Cycling community was very heavily black community. And through various licensing requirements and informal edicts, rules, standards and such, those populations were basically reduced to nothing. Such that if you look at horse racing today, you would never imagine that it used to be a sport dominated by African Americans. So we're no longer, in we're not in 1913, right? We're in 2013. It's unlikely we're going to see the same sort of entrenchment in today's sport as we saw then. But I don't think we can rule it out as impossible. And I think we have to recognize our history in that regard. Recognize both the power of internationalization, but also the respects in which it can be manipulated. And think always about how globalization might impact, for better or for worse, the racial dynamics in our sporting landscapes. Those are my thoughts.
Items of business left today. I have some awards and recognitions for some of our students before we go. I want to give just a few moments for maybe 2 questions for Professor Drew and Professor Gould. They will be joining us at the reception afterwards, so there'll be plenty of time to continue the conversation there as well. But if there's a couple burning questions, and then we'll do our last item of business, and then I will announce the reception. Anyone want to start?
Or maybe you want to? Yeah.
I thought this was great. I'm just wondering how race and class and money issues, because Bill's point about exploitation and child labor issues in Latin America, and your notion about crafting then feeding profit margins of the owners. And I'm just wondering how you see those two intersecting, because they have throughout this racing class.
Yeah, well, I think that, when we go to baseball, I think the essential point that I'm making, and the racial issue is very complex. I talked about the fact that Latin American players, Cuban players in particular, came here and passed as because for the American population, you see, for Latin Americans, race was complexion, not racial identity. And you had, of course, we had Black American players who became, for the purpose of the American public, American Indians, who even the Cuban Giants, the Negro League team, used to talk in a way which they thought would convince people that they were from another country, and they were speaking really gibberish. But they thought that would make them more acceptable. And of course, many of the players who come from Latin America today are Black. Many of them identify with the position of, I think, the position of Black Americans. Some of them are resented by some of the Black American players for obvious, for some of these reasons. I think that I think what we must, I suppose, what my ideas here boil themselves down to are a double barrel. One is that we must, to use this word, this expression, affirmative, actually we must affirmatively get the government involved in at least going at the university where they have a handle, just as they have done in connection with women, albeit quite imperfectly. And we must create a level playing field, not only for Latin American players by eliminating abuses. We don't know whether an international draft system, by the way, is going to change these abuses at all. They don't have an established league system like the Cubans have, like the Japanese have, like the Koreans and Mexicans have. So we don't know what is going to come in the place of the elimination of these academies. And we've got to be ever vigilant in looking at the conditions of these players. There are many players who want to come from the Far East to this country. Why? They're being blocked because of the fact that their leagues are being preserved. But the Red Sox got Tazawa, who played in a so-called industrial league. And the Japanese were very angry about this and said this was the violation of a gentleman's agreement. So the players are the last people to be considered when they're in other countries. What we've done is allow the teams and leagues in other countries to control these players and to let them come out on a very limited basis, just as we've allowed the so-called Busconis to control the Latin players. And I think the approach, I guess in essence I'm saying the approach must proceed on both avenues.
Yeah, I would say, I think, the point that you make, the way you see it is what? What sort of reform will there be with respect to this?
Yes.
Real exploitation of these players is real laid out, the case quite clearly. These players from Dominican, Venezuela, and some of these other If there are reforms, so it is in my remarks I mentioned that, and I think it's unlikely that Major League Baseball will implement international restrictions, right? It's possible. I think it's unlikely. And I think one of the reasons it's unlikely is because of the profit margins. You get 20 players at the price of 1 play. But if there are reforms that reduce those profit margins, that clean up the abuse, to make it just as expensive to get a Dominican player as it is to get a player from New Jersey or something like that. Then I think, although still unlikely, it becomes more likely that we see international play restrictions, because then I think those profit margins that protect the profit margins, I guess, would ward off such restrictions, dissolve away. We see the
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm mindful that I am the last thing standing between us and reception, so I'm going to save the rest of the conversation. Hopefully we'll continue the conversation with Bill and Jeremy in our reception after the event. I want to thank both Bill and Jeremy for being here and joining in this really phenomenal event for us. Thank you, Jeff, for your vision and support of this event throughout the years. Thank you to the members of the Pemberton family for sharing this special evening with us. And thank you to all of you for being here with us tonight. So, for those of you who don't know me, I am Michelle Travis. I am a professor on the faculty, one of the members of our Labor and Employment Law program. And I have the privilege of taking care of our last item of business, as I said, which is to recognize some of the amazing contributions that our students have made this year to USF's Labor and Employment Law program. We are just so pleased to have found a way not only to honor Jack's legacy, but really to also have created a forum in which we keep Jack's conversation about workplace justice alive and thriving and moving forward. This has just become a wonderful event for us to connect our past and our present and our future, and I'm so pleased to be a part of it. So, first, I would like to recognize 3 of our current students who are already making their mark in the labor and employment law field. These are students who have been selected from a highly competitive process to receive a prestigious Peggy Browning Fellowship. These fellowships were established to honor Margaret Browning, who's a union-side attorney and a member of the NLRB, and they really allow students to launch their public interest labor law careers. So as I mentioned, these students, if you could just stand where you're at so that we can recognize you. So last summer, we had 2 Peggy Browning Fellows, who were Daniela Condi and Selby Abraham. And this upcoming summer, our Peggy Browning Fellow will be Alex Leanson. Danielle spent her summer working at the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice. Selby spent his fellowship working at the DC Employment Justice Center, and Alex will be spending his fellowship at Unite here local too. We are so proud that you are representing USF in doing such important work, and I think I feel comfortable saying, and I'm sure Jack would be proud as well, so thank you. Secondly, I would like to recognize the members of USF's Wagner Moot Court competition team. The Wagner competition is the premier national moot court competition in labor and employment law. This year, USF's team of 3 students outperformed 45 other teams in the country to take home the national championship. Today, Alyssa Bussey, if you could stand to be recognized. The other members of the team are Katie Fraser and Zach Webster. I'm assuming you see them on campus, you can congratulate them as well. The team also took the award for the second best petitioner's brief, and Katie was selected as the best oralist. So thank you for the contribution to our program. Third, I would like to acknowledge 3 of our students and recent grads who have published law review articles on cutting-edge labor and employment law topics this past year. They are Juliana Garcia, Rachel Morosky, and Beth Hurwitz. These law review articles really have crossed an amazing range of topics in our field, from farm workers to public employment to discrimination in the workplace. And they're just making such an important contribution in the academic discourse in our field. So I'd like to recognize Juliana, Rachel, and Elizabeth as well. And last but not least, I would like to present the awards for our graduating students. So each year, we have the pleasure of selecting our top graduating students to receive the ABA BNA Award for Excellence in the Study of Labor and Employment Law. This award is sponsored by the American Bar Association Section on Labor and Employment Law and the Bureau of National Affairs. And it is given to a very select group of students because of their academic performance in our labor and employment law curriculum and because of their demonstrated commitment to our field. We are lucky to have many of our former ABA BNA Award winners in the audience with us today. Their names are also on the back of your program. They have really gone on to do amazing work in our field. So I have the privilege of identifying for the first time our new award winners for this year. And this year we have selected 4 of our graduating students, 3 from the full-time program and 1 from our evening part-time program. So as I announce these 4 names, if the winners of the ABA BNA Award for Excellence in the Study of Labor and Employment Law could actually come up to the podium to receive your award, that would be great. So the first recipient of our award for excellence this year is Daniela Condi. So Daniela is not only been one of our Peggy Browning Fellows, but she's been a dedicated member of our Labor and Employment Law Students Association and has just done incredible work in a wide variety of organizations and internships, particularly in the advancement of low-wage and immigrant workers in our community. So we're so proud of her. The second recipient of our award for excellence is Jillian Ayers-Jones. That she did during her time here as a student on flexible work arrangements and disparate impact litigation, which was just an outstanding piece of work in our field. So congratulations. Our third recipient of the Award for Excellence is Karen Majowski. Karen in particular for her incredible contributions to our employment law clinic. Congratulations. And our final recipient, who is a member of our part-time evening program, is Christina Brogdon. Christina has also been an amazing contributor to our employment law clinic, and also I personally have had the pleasure of having her as a research assistant. And she's done tremendous work, particularly in the field of disability discrimination in the workplace. So I'd like to congratulate all of our ABA BNA Award winners for excellence. Present and future contributors to USF's Labor and Employment Law program. Thank you so much for your continued commitment to Jack Pemberton's legacy. We hope to see all of you next year at the 10th annual Jack Pemberton Lecture on Justice. And I hope to have share conversation with you in our reception, which will be held right in the foyer outside the courtroom. Thank you so much for coming.